welcome to Dale Street Evangelical Church Online. It's really good to be with you this morning, to be able to share with you. We've been looking at the subject of light for a couple of weeks now, and this morning we're going to be looking at a couple of verses in the book of Matthew, and the subject of a light that shines on others. It's Matthew chapter 5 and verse 14. I'm sure I don't have to tell you that we live in a pretty dark world at the moment. We've all experienced examples of living in darkness, I guess more recently over the last year. In September this year will be the 20th anniversary of the tragic attacks on the World Trade Center in America 20 years ago. Many of us will remember the exact moment that we heard about it. We'll know where we were when it came on the news, and we heard the shocking stories of what happened over there. And that very darkness came to our own shores in May 2017 at a concert in Manchester, where some bombings took place, and sadly 23 people lost their lives and over 800 people were injured. And then we roll forward to 2020 and a global pandemic hits. Darkness that covers the whole world, and we all experience the effects of that. And to some extent, we're all still trying to adjust to the changes that's brought. I think, unfortunately, for many Christians, darkness seems to be something that we've become accustomed to, and I think the more that we live around it, the more we become desensitized to it. And the question for us this morning, really, the challenge the challenge that's been brought to me, if I've looked at these verses, what should our response be as a Christian? How should we respond to the darkness? If we just look at these verses here, starting at verse 14 of chapter 5 in the Gospel of Matthew, it says, "You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." Right at the start of verse 14 there, Jesus is speaking to his disciples and he says, "You are the light of the world." Now that grabbed me straight away. He's saying you are the light of the world, present tense. Right now, you are the light of the world. The word light in the Greek is phos, which is where we get our word photograph from. And I was thinking about when I was a child, we used to have, and some of you will remember this, you'll be a lot older than me, and you'll remember having Polaroid photographs. The camera where you would take a picture and the piece of paper would come out the bottom of it, you give it a bit of a shake, and after a few minutes the picture would develop. They seem to be coming back into fashion again these days, but we are supposed to be a clear picture of who Jesus is to this dark world. And I just wondered, when I looked at myself, how am I reflecting Jesus in my life? Has the paper just come out of the camera? Is it still a bit fuzzy? Or is it developing? Is it becoming clearer? Or is it a crystal clear image of Jesus? Jesus says, "You are the light of the world." Now, light does many things, but I just wanted to look at two quick things that light does. Number one, light reveals truth. And number two, light exposes darkness. So I guess we know if we're being a crystal clear image of Jesus, if we are simply revealing truth and exposing darkness. I found as I was reading these verses in my Bible, just in the margin next to it, there was a link to a verse in John chapter 8, and it's John 8 verse 12. And you might be familiar with this. It says, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." So there in John chapter 8 we see Jesus saying, "I am the light of the world." And now here in Matthew chapter 5 we see him saying, "You are the light of the world." Now, I'm a bit of a science boffin, and when I was at school it was my favourite subject. And I always like to think of things in scientific terms, but as I read these verses, it made me think of a bit of a metaphor that Jesus is like the sun, and we are like the moon. And I'm sure I don't have to tell you that the moon doesn't produce its own light. The light that we see on the moon is reflected from the sun. And the moon provides light to the world on a night time during the darkness by reflecting the light of the sun. Now, the only time that the moon doesn't produce light is during the time of a solar eclipse, which is when the world gets between the sun and the moon and it blocks out the light. And sometimes we can experience a spiritual eclipse. Sometimes we can experience a period of darkness in our spiritual lives when we've allowed the world to get between ourselves and Jesus. Verse 14 says, a town built on a hill cannot be hidden. And I wonder what Jesus is saying here. I think he's saying that there's no such thing as an undercover Christian. There's no secret service when it comes to God. And when I thought about that, I chuckled a little bit. When I look back at my early years when I was at school, when I was at college, and even when I went into early employment, my first few jobs, I wonder what my friends and colleagues would have thought if somebody would have said, James, that Christian, that James that goes to church. They probably would have said, James who? When I was at school, a lot of my friends played for a football team on a Sunday and would invite me to go and play with them, and I would always make an excuse. I would say, I wouldn't tell them I was going to Sunday school, I was going to church. I would say, I need to go and see my gran, she's not very well, or whatever excuse I could think of. I was petrified of telling my friends and colleagues that I was a Christian. And Jesus says, a town on a hill cannot be hidden. And verse 15 says, neither people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. And Jesus is saying here, what's the purpose of having the light if you're going to cover it up? What's the purpose of having light if you're just going to hide it? What's the purpose of trying to flicker at all if you're only going to flicker in private and you're only going to live your Christian life behind closed doors? Now, I have some pretty good colleagues at work now, and I've been in my current job for about 10 years, working for the council. And all of my friends and all my colleagues at work all know that I'm a Christian. And I'm not saying we should all go to work and start preaching in the kitchen. We should be getting up on the countertop in the canteen and preaching to people, because work are not paying us to do that. Work are paying us to work hard, and we should be working hard. Ephesians 6 verse 7 says, we do things with goodwill, doing service as to the Lord and not unto man. And that was a challenge for me. We should be the best workers at work. And I think back to the times when I used to cover up my faith, and I wonder why I used to do that. And I guess for lots of people, there's lots of different reasons. But I think the main one is fear. I think if you ask most people why they don't share their faith so much, it's fear. Maybe fear of being ridiculed, or fear of being laughed at, fear of what people might think of us, fear of what they might say about us when our backs are turned. And then there's another big one this day and age, is the fear of offending. You can't say very much these days without offending somebody. Everything seems to be offensive. Don't get me wrong, some things are, but the fear of offending is a big one. It seems these days that the devil's really got a clever way of crafting things, that everyone seems to have a voice. Everyone seems to be coming out of the closet, and Christians are putting in the closet. And I've just found that a real challenge for me when I'm in and out of work and in and out of the circles that I move in, that I would just pray that God would give me the eyes to see the open doors that He opens for me. Verse 15 goes on, it says, neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. Now, Jesus already said in verse 14 that you are the light of the world, but here in verse 15 he's now saying that the light first needs to be seen by those in the house. And maybe if you're someone who struggles with sharing your faith and sharing your faith and shining your light, the home is the first place. The home is the place where we should start. We should be trying to shine that light on our friends and our family, on our spouses, on our children, on those that are closest to us. And I guess in a sense the home is a bit of a testing ground for those who are going to be called into God's service. Verse 16, in the same way, let your light shine before others, that they might see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. The word let is a verb, and it means not to prevent, but to allow. Jesus is saying, allow your light to shine. Don't prevent it from shining. Now, whenever I look at verses, when I'm speaking, I like to look at different translations of it. And I was flicking through on the computer. You can change the translation on the website that I use, and I found in the authorized version it doesn't say let your light shine. It actually says let your light so shine, and the word so is used there to add extra emphasis to the phrase. The word so means to a greater extent. let your light so shine. Which reminds me of another verse in the Bible. It's in John chapter 3 verse 16 where it says, for God so loved the world. And the writer there uses the word so because saying that God loved the world wasn't enough to express the way that God feels about the world. It says, for God so loved the world to such a greater extent. And here it's saying, let your light so shine. I think that's really important for us. The importance of letting our light shine. Why is it that we should let our light shine? So people can see our good works. It's because they can't see our faith. I guess if you were driving around on the motorway, or you were in a restaurant, or you were looking around you in a supermarket, you can't see who's got faith. Faith is internal. Ephesians 3:17 says, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith. John 4 verse 4 says, greater is he that is in us than he that is in the world. And Colossians 1:27 says, Christ in you, the hope of glory. And that's faith, and that's on the inside. People can't see that, but they can see our work and our good deeds, which is external. And we notice what happens when people see our good works. It says they will glorify your Father in heaven. And I guess the challenge for us this morning is just that we should be doing things in such a way that when people see our good works, that they see something that sets us apart from others. And Jesus is saying, you are the light of the world. And we should be reflecting that light that we've received through salvation. We should be presenting a crystal clear image of Jesus. And that's the challenge for us this week. Thank you for listening this morning. Take care and God bless.